everyone. Welcome to episode 30 of No Such Thing as a Fish. We recorded a live podcast last night, our first live podcast, and we've decided to put it out tonight for some reason, and basically unedited, so it's pretty long. But yeah, hope you enjoy it. We really enjoyed it, so much, in fact, that we are going to do another live podcast. Tickets are going to go on sale for that on Monday. Tickets will be available at chortle.co.uk or at nosuchthingsaffish.com. It's going to be in Camden, London, so keep an eye out for that. And hope you enjoy this one.
We ran it on QI a few years ago.
Yeah.
Which was, there's no such thing as a fish.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a fish.
No, seriously, it's in the Oxford Dictionary of Underwater Life. It says it right there, first paragraph, no such thing as a fish.
Hello! Welcome to another episode of No Such Thing as a Fish, a weekly podcast coming to you this week from the Aces and Eights bar in Tufnell Park. This is our first ever live recording. My name is Dan Schreiber. Please welcome to the stage the three regular elves, Andy Murray, Anna Chazinski, and James Horkin. And once again, we have gathered round with our four favorite facts from the last 7 days, and in no particular order, here we go. Fact number one, and beginning with you, James.
Okay, my fact this week is that the first BBC radio presenter with a northern accent was given the job to make it more difficult for the Nazis to impersonate newsreaders.
So why were the Nazis impersonating newsreaders?
They thought that if they could pretend to be newsreaders over the radio, then people would believe anything they said, and they'd be able to say, oh, we've got such a strong army, and people would just believe it.
So they raid the BBC?
It was just propaganda, really. They would pretend to be BBC newsreaders.
Okay.
And
Lord Haw and people like that.
But, yeah.
Yeah, it's also why we've got James on the podcast.
Is James a Nazi?
No, this was a guy called Wilfred Pickles. He was the first northern newsreader from 1941. He was from Yorkshire. And a lot of people didn't believe the news when he read it out because he had a northern accent. Apparently.
What did they think? They thought that's a Nazi trying to do a British accent.
No, I don't know what they thought, really. They just thought, this guy is, uneducated. He can't possibly know what the news is.
That's what I read this thing about in the early days of news reporting, particularly on radio, that they never, it was all male presenters, and they said that they wouldn't allow female presenters on because they didn't want them to have to go through reading bad news, like upsetting news stories.
Wow.
Yeah, they just thought, they're not going to like that. That would be, it's too emotional. And it's true, it's a BBC thing where they announced that. They said, well, we're not going to allow women to do that. They'll be too upset when they hear this bad news. No, it's terrible, right?
They did have one in 1933, the first female newsreader. She was called Mrs. Giles Borrett. I don't know what her real first name was. It doesn't seem to come up anywhere.
Have you seen a picture of
Mrs.
her?
Giles
Yeah, as in named after her husband.
We were assholes to women back in the day, weren't we? We still are, but doubly so. That's terrible.
Yeah, there were complaints. She was there for 2 months, and the BBC took her off the air for technical reasons.
Oh, jeez. Technically, her gender is wrong.
Did you know that all newsreaders were originally anonymous?
No.
So they didn't give their names on air. It was just the voice of the BBC News. And so we have the Nazis to thank for named newsreaders, because during the war, people said that they should be able to listen and kind of authenticate who they were listening to. So the first one was Frank Phillips, and he said, in July 1940, Battle of Britain time, this is Frank Phillips from the BBC, so that, again, you couldn't be impersonated. But so today we might have Hugh Edwards just being a man on a screen.
Wow.
With
That's
no
kind of what
identifying
he
features.
is to me.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird, though, that none of them identified themselves?
Do you guys know about the very first ever BBC news report on the radio?
No.
Okay, it's great. It was on the 14th of November, and I forgot to look up the date. But it's on the 14th of November, so we're coming up to the anniversary. Very exciting. Basically, he read out the news. It was a guy called Arthur Burrows, and he read it out, but he read it twice. Once quickly, and then once slowly, and then asked the listeners, which did you prefer? Wow. Just for future recordings to know which way
and
to
then
go.
which did they go with?
It's not been recorded. I don't know the answer.
So
I'm
we don't
guessing
know
slower.
if now we have quick news or slow news.
I have no idea. I have no idea.
idea.
Also, it was really weird because when they started doing the news, they did it post 7 p.m. and Lord Reith joined. So Lord Reith, if you don't know his name, he's the guy who in the BBC they have a big kind of saying which is to entertain, inform, and educate. That's the Lord Reith philosophy for BBC that everyone's tried to stick to. He joined a week after the very first broadcast of a radio announcement telling the news on the BBC, and he had this thing where he said, "We don't want anyone to be doing news bulletins before 6 p.m. because the newspapers will be hurt as a result of it." And so no one was allowed to do anything in terms of announcing any news, to the point that when they showed horse racing when they played horse racing on the news, they couldn't have commentators commentating on the horse race. So you listened to hooves and people cheering at like 4 p.m. and then at 7 p.m. they go and Blitzer won. They would wait till the 7 o'clock news to announce.
Was there a pause in between the end of the hooves?
I think so.
And Blitzer won.
Yeah.
So speaking of radio, though, do you know what they did in 1955 when ITV started? I think it was 1955, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And what the BBC did to try and jeopardise ITV's chances.
No.
They didn't. It wasn't actually on TV because radio was a more popular medium at that time. They killed off Grace Archer in The
Gasp.
Archers. Gasp. 20 million people tuned in. The population of Britain was 40 million at the time. Half the country tuned in to listen to Grace get killed off in The Archers.
The Archers fans really hate you, don't they, Dan?
Not well, yeah. So outside, anyone who listens to this podcast might know that we also, the four of us, work for QI, and one of the QI things is a radio show called Museum of Curiosity. And Museum of Curiosity is played at 6:30 every evening on a Monday, and Archers follows immediately, and we get the shit ripped out of us by the Archers fans. They hate us, and they say how much they hate us, and then they do #TheArchers. And so everyone...
Why do they hate you?
They catch the last 5 minutes of Museum of Curiosity,
right.
and we're usually talking about pubic lice or something like that. And it doesn't come up on the Archers, apparently.
No, it doesn't. There was a fantastic one this week, though. There was someone who actually tweeted, "What is this garbage? I absolutely hate it. #The Archers." Someone wrote back going, "I know, this program sucks. They should cancel it. The Archers is terrible." And they were like, no. Lovely confusion.
I have a fact about Lord Reith.
Oh, yeah.
John Reith, as he was then. When he applied for the post of General Manager of the British Broadcasting Company, he did not know what broadcasting was. And he wrote in his diary that when he was called to an interview, he, quotes, still hadn't the remotest idea as to what broadcasting was. I hadn't troubled to find out. And they gave him the job.
God, interviews are really different now. So do you know where remote controls were first? What was the main attraction of them? How they were marketed?
Remote controls.
What, for TV?
Yeah, is that not what we're calling them?
You don't have to get up and walk over to the thing, presumably.
It is that, but their main strategy in the marketing was that it was after ITV came about and adverts came about, and remote controls were just volume controls, and they looked like one of those rotary phones, so they were like a dial, which you just dialed up or down, and it was so you could mute the adverts. So adverts came onto TV, and immediately they marketed something that could make them shut.
There was one really early. Remote control that was done by light. The problem with it was that when the sun shone on it, it would turn the channel over.
There's a great. I was talking about this in the office a few days ago, and I can't verify this fact, and I really want to. Anyone who knows this show, I'm known as the dubious one on this show.
Not just on this show.
Just in life. The way I do any research for this show is to put in the fact and then put plus Yeti. That's my kind of research for this show. That's how bad I am at it. But I read a fact in a book years ago when I first moved to England, and it was a fact that when they did live TV dramas, they would have a thing where obviously it was black and white, everything had to be done live as they were going along, and the actors, if they forgot their lines as they were doing this play live, they would mime speaking, and then the other actor would mime speaking back at them, so that while the production were quickly trying to find cards that could show them what the next line was, the people at home were going, "What the hell's wrong with the TV? Our sound's gone again!" and get up and hit it, and then by the time they remember the line, they'd be like, "We should go to the shops," and then they're back into the play. But I can't prove this as a fact. So if anyone listening or anyone in this room tonight knows it, please let me know.
Yeah. Don't wait up for the post.
Accents? Oh, go on.
What? No. What was yours?
Well, I've got some accent stuff
to
talk about. You know, foreign accent syndrome.
Oh yeah.
What's that?
What's
It's a
that?
real thing. So it's not just mad people making it up. Which I kind of use. You know when someone wakes up
You'd
and
make
is
a
like,
terrible
"Oh, I woke up with an Irish
psychiatrist."
accent. Yeah, I would. But yeah, it's a real thing. So it happens if you have a particularly bad migraine, you can get foreign accent syndrome. But it's not where you wake up with a specific foreign accent. It's just where you wake up with an accent that sounds kind of like a foreign accent. So there's like an interview with this woman, Julie Mathias, who just had a migraine and now speaks in this bizarre kind of Scandinavian, Indian, South African hybrid. And I think it's really horrible for her. 'cause
Is it? It must be tough, right?
Also, Capgras syndrome. Do you know that one?
What's that?
It's
No.
where you believe that one of your loved ones has actually been has died and been replaced by a robot or something like that.
What?
That's
Oh,
a
yeah,
real
no,
syndrome.
yeah. What? No, like
We all
we've
have
all
it.
had it. Like that time when my dad died and was replaced by a robot.
Yeah, but that actually happened.
Yeah, but for people with the syndrome, woof.
Yeah, rough.
But if you Google this and look for examples of it happening, there's like pretty much one or two examples on the BBC News, and the most famous person to have it done was called Alan Davis.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I always wanted to run that on QI, but thought, no, not really. It's mental
Just in
illness.
case it's actually him.
Yeah.
Oh, right. You went, I can't believe you're mocking me on QI.
Do you want to hear something cool about the Queen's accent?
Yeah.
So they've done a study on her without her. Okay, they've listened to the Queen's speech from different decades. So they listened to loads from the 1950s, and then they listened to loads from the 1980s, and they found that she no longer speaks the Queen's English. So they measured loads of her sounds.
Surely, by definition, what she says is the Queen's English.
That's true. But it was a study at Macquarie University in Australia, and they said that her accent has drifted a bit, so she sounds a bit like some younger, and I'm using their words,
She
lower.
sounds Jamaican now.
She sounds Jamaican. They said she has Cockney influences now. Apparently, yeah. I mean, you can't tell. Apparently, most of the changes, it was 12 or 13 vowel sounds.
She
that-
says, "You get me."
Yeah.
At the end of it.
Well, we
Why can't we tell if she
Well,
has it?
Well, machines can hear it, apparently. Computers can hear
Machines?
Your
my
father.
my dad, yeah.
Your dad, yeah.
But they were so happy to study her because, and these are the words, she hasn't lived in different communities that might alter her accent. Yeah. No kidding.
So you reckon she got it off TV or something?
I don't know, maybe. Yeah, she is she's a huge fan of, I think the
No
Archers.
Such Thing as a
of the
Fish?
Archers, yeah. It's a Miracle Museum is still going.
You should see her
yeah.
tweets to me. They're terrible.
You know,
And so-
she didn't do a speech in 1969. There was no Queen's speech on TV.
Why
And the
not?
reason was she had already done one interview that year in the summer for a documentary.
and
so
it
she
changed
said,
her accent so much that she couldn't bear.
No, she just said, that's enough. You get one dose of Queenie a year. And that was it for 1969. So she didn't.
Wow.
Yeah, that's great.
We used to speak rhotic English, didn't we? Which is how the Americans speak English. So the way Americans speak is the way that is proper English. Is the English that we were speaking in the 17th century. Yeah, we don't pronounce our R's, and that's wrong. And that's because spelling hasn't kept up with the way we speak.
What do you mean don't pronounce her? Like
Oh
when?
God, I'm not going to be able to think of any examples now.
Like
So you know,
grass
if
and
we said, I've just got the word
grass,
Somerset written down here. So if we say Somerset, they'd say Somerset.
Somerset.
Although that actually just sounds like a Somerset accent. Since I'm my forte, say Somerset, Dan. You've got a
Somerset.
yeah, exactly,
And
like
you-
Covent
yeah.
Garden.
Cover.
Yeah,
Well,
but there's no R in Covent.
Well, I know he's got it wrong.
This is the biggest contentious. I have a messed up accent. I know I have a messed up accent. The main tweet outside of Archer's hatred towards me that I get is people listening to our show saying, "Why are you saying Covent Garden?" Like, I get so much shit for my accent.
What about the child who listens to the podcast?
Oh, there's a child who listens to our podcast. They're
3-4 years old.
Yeah, 3-4 years old. The godmother wrote into us to say that, James, every time you talk, my little goddaughter, she smiles and she's so happy.
Aw, how nice.
Yeah, and then when Dan comes on, she frowns and looks disappointed and stops listening. Really splitting accent.
Wow.
Okay, let's go back to the point in hand.
Yeah.
I want to speak about Wilfred Pickles. So this was the guy with a northern accent who read the news. He also was the host of the first British quiz show to give away prizes. It was called Have a Go, and the jackpot was £3.
Oh, that's
That's
sweet.
good, isn't it?
Well, it was more then, I suppose, but still.
Yeah.
It's sweet.
It's not Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, is it?
Who wants to own £3?
But they got an audience of 26 million.
Wow, when was
Yeah.
that?
If you think about what Bake Off got, 13 million last
12,
week?
yeah.
12 million? This was up to 1967 he did it.
Yeah, a lot more people used to watch.
Yeah, but they didn't have
Only
Bake
2
Off.
channels.
They didn't have Bake Off back then.
That's
so,
true.
You know,
What was the fact that you told me in the office the other day about like attire and stuff when they were recording in radio, early radio, about what they had to wear? I actually know
yes.
the fact.
Oh, no.
I was
Okay,
just...
yes. No, I do remember, Dan, yes. In the 30s, the British newsreaders had to wear a dinner suit even though you couldn't see them when they were reading the news on the radio.
I really like that.
you can
Yeah.
tell, though. You can tell with the voice
Yeah,
when
exactly.
they're sitting up properly.
They won't be slouching like I am now, would they?
Is that why? Was that their justification?
Yeah, I think it gives you a better, posture, a better accent.
No, just, they're just being annoying about it. Sure.
Yeah.
For anyone
Apparently-
listening, we're all wearing dinner jackets now.
Some animals have accents, don't they? But not all.
What?
And I'm trying to
yeah.
distinguish which animals do and which don't.
No,
so,
yeah, they do.
So people tended to think that like hardly any animals have accents. Like animals, it's in their genes the way they speak. But then farmers in the north of England reported that I think this might have been where I just read Somerset. It was a Somerset farmer who said that his cows had a different accent to the farmers in surrounding counties.
Yeah.
And it's a,
yes.
it's a social thing they do.
They moo in accents.
That
yeah.
won
Yes.
that won an Ig Nobel Prize, didn't it?
Yeah.
Cows moo in regional accents.
Yeah.
A peer-reviewed scientific paper that
And
yeah.
you can babies as well. Babies have regional accents.
moo in
the
different
way-
accents.
Yeah, no, babies go. French and German babies have different ways of saying ah.
Neither of them sound like that.
German ones go ah, and I'm paraphrasing. And French babies go nah. Okay, there is a difference, and machines can hear it. My dad, if he would say.
We should wrap up on our first fact. We got anything else? Anyone want to add anything?
Apparently, the announcers on the BBC, if they would cough during a broadcast, they would be inundated with cough lozenges and woolen underwear because everyone was scared that they had a cold.
So guys, whenever you want to start throwing,
Oh, that's really good. Okay.
I have one more.
Yeah, go for it,
Just
yeah.
to go, in case we don't come back onto the subject of radio for loads of podcasts. When Woman's Hour began in 1946, it was hosted by a man. And early items on the show included cooking with whale meat, I married a lion tamer, and how to hang your husband's suit. True.
Great end fact. Okay. Time for fact number 2, and that is my fact. And my fact this week is that in China, if you want to empty a building of people, a building full of people, if you want to empty it, you play this song.
Don't get up and leave if you hear this.
and it doesn't work apparently.
So, this is a
Does
song...
anyone know what that is?
No one. Okay.
Anyone
Cool.
can even guess the artist.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Kenny G.
Oh, 5 points.
Yeah. Now, this is a weird thing. No one in this country, in the UK, seems to know who Kenny G is. Kenny G is one of the biggest artists in the world and in my heart. He's sold 75 million albums worldwide. He played at the inauguration of Bill Clinton. He worked on the Bodyguard soundtrack. If you watch the Grammys in the 90s, invariably at some point, Michael Bolton would rock on stage next to Kenny G and they would own it. And the interesting thing is that since the year 2000, in 1989, this song came out and it got really big. It's called Going Home by Kenny G. And for some reason, it got adopted, and no one really knows why, in China as the Going Home song. So at the end
Might
of the
have been
I
day...
think
with
because
the
it's
name.
called Going Home.
Why? Why did they choose it?
You wouldn't do
Going
it.
Home song? Why didn't they choose melody in B?
Wake me up before you go. What?
So they basically, it's a tune that just gets played everywhere. At schools, at the end of school, they play it to kids to go home. If you're on a train that's entering the final stop of its destination, the terminal, they play that song. Everywhere in China, in a marketplace, they'll play it on loop for an hour and a half to tell you to get out. And Kenny G...
People aren't really getting the hint if you have to play it for an hour and a half.
At the end of a party, presumably, you play that when you want everyone to leave.
Because as a result of this song, he doesn't get any royalties from it, but he plays a lot of gigs in China now. He had to make sure that he put that song at the end, otherwise people start leaving. during the gig. But this is an insane thing.
If he
I had no
if
idea
he did
about.
get royalties, though, he would be richer than Bill Gates. If they play it for an hour and a half every day at the closing of a market.
Not only that, when TV used to end at, say, like 12 a.m. or 11 p.m., whenever it is in China, up until 6 a.m. when it came back on, it would be on loop. That was the song that played.
God.
Kenny G is massive in China.
I read a few accounts from Chinese people saying, I'm pretty sick of this song now. I liked it the first time I heard it, and now I really don't. So I think...
So I hadn't heard of Kenny G. Oh no, I had heard of him. I didn't know what he was. But I think that's us being musically illiterate. I think everyone else in Britain, I think you're tarring British people with our brush by saying no one's heard of Kenny G.
No. No one in this room except one person, right?
Oh, they
no,
are.
no,
loads.
they-
Oh,
Loads.
loads. Okay.
Yeah.
Well done.
So the only
Okay.
thing, so I was like, I haven't heard of this guy. I don't really listen to music that was, made in the last 40 years. So I just decided I'll look up something about music. I know he's kind of jazz. Let's look up a circular breathing. The longest musical note ever held lasted 45 minutes and 47 seconds, and the record was set by Kenny G.
Yeah.
It was so great.
This guy is
All
phenomenal.
I know about him.
Yeah.
Well, I like playing golf, and I looked up who's the best musician who plays golf, and it's Kenny G. It really is.
everywhere.
He's off plus 0.8.
And many years ago, Kenny G woke up one morning when his uncle said, I have a business my friend is running, and I think you might be interested. You should buy some stocks into it. They make coffee. And he went, I'll buy some stocks. And he now has made almost as much money off the back of the fact that he put stocks into Starbucks before it launched, as much as he's made from his 75 million albums.
So should we boycott him now? I have been doing an unconscious boycott of him all my life. I didn't know who he was.
No, I didn't know who Kenny G was either, and I googled Kenny G is, and the first two are Kenny G is my imaginary friend, and Kenny G is Katy Perry's uncle, and I looked it up, and he isn't. So I have no idea what that's about at all. And then I spent the rest of the afternoon googling Katy Perry's uncle, who is even less interesting than Kenny G.
What's he do? Who is he?
He's a director of movies. He's dead now.
Oh,
But,
okay.
Ooh, bit of a downer.
You didn't even know him.
And in fairness, guys, he was a robot.
Circular breathing. There was a thing in Greece called the Disfigurement of Athens, and it's written about by some Greek writers. And apparently that was a weird facial disfigurement you would get if you did too much circular breathing.
Oh, really? What's that like?
Don't know.
I don't really know how you do it.
No, how you do circular breathing?
Yeah.
I read about how to do it the other day, and
I know how to do
I can't do it.
You save a little bit of air in your mouth, and then you breathe through your nose.
Is that how
That little
people
bit of air.
beatbox? Is
I don't
beatbox?
know about
And it's to help you sustain notes.
Yeah.
So jazz. He's jazz, right? That's what he does. Otherwise, I've been reading about the wrong stuff.
Yeah. He's jazz.
Let's say he's
I
jazz
assume he's jazz. He
anyway.
plays the saxophone. Dizzy Gillespie ran for president. Did you know that?
What?
Of America.
In 1964, he ran a joke campaign for president. He promised to rename the White House the Blues House and appoint. And he was going to appoint Duke Ellington as his Secretary of State and Miles Davis as head of the CIA, which would have been
Miles Davis
bloody
head of the
brilliant. Yeah. He also Dizzy Gillespie couldn't hit from 1949. He was unable to hit the B flat above high C on his trumpet because he had a very, very minor bicycling accident. But he got $1,000, which I think was quite a lot in 1949.
Sure.
In compensation for it because it damaged his art. But could never hit that high B flat.
Yeah.
Wait, a minor cycling accident
Just a twisted ankle. Yeah.
stopped him from being able to hit a high...
Weird. Yeah. Maybe he was winded or something.
Bizarre.
You can sue for damaging your art.
Your what? Your art?
Dan, I don't think you've got a case.
Just checking.
Another influential jazz person, most influential guitarist of all time.
Jimi Hendrix.
I was going to go with Django Reinhardt. Or maybe we're talking like jazz guitar.
Oh, okay.
Was missing the two main guitar-playing fingers, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So only ever did solos on two fingers.
Didn't he die because he refused to go to a doctor?
Yes, I
Does
think
anyone-
he did.
Yeah, he had a minor medical condition. And he didn't go to a doctor, and then it got bad, and then he died. Does anyone know what? Can anyone remember what he had?
Don't remember, no.
No.
Just speaking of Django, this is a very weird link, but it's something when I was looking into all the stuff about Kenny G being massive in China. It is curious when you find out about people who are big in other countries who aren't sort of as like Norman Wisdom being massive in Albania.
Yeah.
Like Norman Wisdom is huge still to this day in Albania. When he died, it was almost a national holiday, and they have
A national holiday.
National Day of Mourning. I think you were going to say.
Yeah,
Finally, the hated Wisdom is removed. When Kenny G dies, a lot of Chinese society will celebrate not having to listen to this song anymore.
That's true. That's true.
Oh, come on.
There's a lot of Kenny G love in the room.
People more famous in other countries.
Yeah. So I was reading about people who are more famous. The list of Americans, or just people, foreign people to China being big there. It's quite interesting. The most famous person in China is Kobe Bryant, who's a basketball player, which I did not expect.
The most famous person in all of China.
Well, my theory is that it's actually Mr. Bean, which...
And then in at number 3, Mao Zedong. Just phrase it, Dan.
No, it's the most famous foreigner.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not clear.
But these people are getting bigger and bigger, and as a result, there's a really interesting thing going on with the movie world at the moment, which is that the Chinese movie world has now overtaken Bollywood. It's taken over everything except America. They're the second largest movie makers in the world, and so as a result of these people's names getting quite big, they're getting put into movies now and being sold to China. And as a result, so the top film in China last year was Transformers, above anything in the world, right? They absolutely loved it, the latest Transformers movie that came out. But they do this really interesting thing where they have to edit out certain bits of the movie as it exists, because it turns out there's a lot of anti-Chinese government stuff in movies that we don't realize. So when movies go out, suddenly there's a missing 5 minutes where a character has been taken out, and it suddenly just doesn't make sense. Cloud Atlas, they took out 43 minutes of the movie when they took it to China.
You could argue that it could miss 43 minutes, couldn't you?
I haven't seen it.
When The Sound of Music came out in South Korea, it was really, really popular, and cinemas were playing it 4 or 5 times a day. And one cinema owner wanted to work out a way that he could play it more times a day to get more paying customers in. So he edited out all the songs.
That's amazing.
That's like, if anyone heard an episode that we did, I think it was last week or the week before, Chuck Norris, when he plays his movies to his kids, doesn't like the idea of his kids seeing the fight scenes in the Chuck Norris movies, so he personally edits out all the fight scenes from his movies, and his kids just watch it, and I cannot think of a worse experience than watching a fightless...
Sound of Music without any songs.
Yeah. Okay,
it's just called Of.
I can.
People must have left the cinema so confused. What was with the title?
Just to qualify, when I said Django, the reason I said that is Django Unchained, the Quentin Tarantino movie, went into China and was pulled minutes from all of the cinemas when it started because it had a nude scene, and they don't allow nudity in movies now.
That's not anti-China propaganda,
no,
to be fair to Django Unchained.
No, it's just they have strict laws still with cinema.
The other thing is that China is the biggest, as in the amount of money they take, not the number of movies they make, I think.
Because it's Nollywood, Bollywood, Hollywood,
which is Nigeria.
Yeah, they do this thing as well now. So like when we watch a James Bond movie, how they take out, you just see Richard Branson suddenly in it, and it's obviously a Virgin ad, or it's just product placement the whole way through. They reshoot scenes with Chinese product placement. So which movie was it here? It was during World War Z.
Oh, yeah. Great movie.
Great film.
Great movie.
It is a great film.
Was it World War Z? I think
you like Pacific Rim as your greatest
I love
ever movie.
Pacific Rim. Come on. Thank you.
Oh my goodness.
Jaegers forever. All right. I saw an edited version of World War Z because I was on a plane watching it, because that's when you should watch World War Z, and they edited out the bit with the enormous plane zombie scene, which ends with the plane crashing.
Really?
Oh, really?
Yeah, weird, right? These censors. Let us watch the scene. That's fair.
We should move on. We've done quite a lot.
I just want to say one more thing. So this Kenny G's real name is
Kenneth
Gorlick.
Kenneth Gorlick.
Oh. Yeah.
And I thought I'd check and see if I had anything on him in my files on my computer, and I didn't have anything on him, but I did have something on another Kenneth Gorlick. And this is...
That is a weird
coincidence, isn't it? Kenneth J. Gorlick, this is.
Oh, yeah.
He's a medic, and he wrote a paper called A 4-Letter Word in the Medical Literature. And he went through all medical literature looking for instances of the word fuck. Okay? He found 17 instances since the 1960s. 4 were about a fungus called fuck. 2 were sexual, and 6 were the author. Okay.
What
And
do you mean?
as in the name of the author.
Oh, right, sorry.
So he wrote, the most prolific single contributor was Dr. E. Fuck, whose 4 German language publications on the malic acid metabolism of saccharolytices constitute a major contribution to the field. This may be about to change with the emergence of Dr. L. Fuck as a co-author of a publication in 1999. So look
That's
out for those
amazing.
new fucks.
Okay, let's move on to fact number 3, and that is Jasinski.
Yeah, it is. Is it? My fact is that the 2 leading paleontologists of the 19th century used to destroy their fossil sites after excavating them so that their rival wasn't able to find anything on them.
That's insane.
And these really were the 2, by far and away, the leading paleontologists. So they were Edward Drinker Cope and Othniel Charles Marsh.
Othniel.
Othniel, yep,
What a-
that's
what a
right, that's his name.
Strong
Got a
name.
problem with that?
No. No, ma'am. It's just a brilliant name.
It's good.
Yeah.
So before they came along, there were 9 species of dinosaur had been discovered and named, and between the 2 of them, by the time they both died, they'd named 136 species between them, including all the ones you've heard of, all the big ones: Stegosaurus, Diplodocus, Triceratops, all those guys. And they kind of liked each other at first, so they met in 1867, and they named species after one another. So a giant serpent from New Jersey was called Mosasaurus copianus after Cope, and vice versa.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that was because they liked him, because it actually is Cope Anus. Copianus.
Is it?
That's what it is.
Yeah, so I think that might have been an insult.
If only you'd been there to tell him. He thought they were best friends. I think this is why he was so upset.
And Dickheadosaurus? What is that?
So, relationship went sour when Cope showed off this fossil of an Elasmosaurus at a big showing of new fossils he discovered.
Classic faux pas.
Yeah. Not at the end yet. Did that, put the head on the wrong end of it, and Marsh said, I think you put the head on the tail, and Cope was like, no, I haven't, you're wrong, and they called in the museum curator, the academy curator, who said, yeah, you put the head on the wrong end, and he was so humiliated by that Marsh wrote that after that, he's been my bitter enemy. And it was so extreme. They spent 25 years stealing each other's fossils. They both employed teams of sort of spies to go and jeopardize each other's sites. So they'd steal and break each other's fossils. One of them, Marsh, got into government so that he could withdraw funding from the other guy. There was this constant exchange of letters where one would say, some of my fossils are damaged and have disappeared. I know you're responsible. And the other one would write back going, it's outrageous that you'd accuse me of that, but since you mentioned it, some of my fossils have gone missing. And it's just 25 years of this.
Wow.
It was called the Bone Wars.
The Bone Wars.
Yeah.
How would they destroy each other's sort of...
Well, dynamite was how Marsh did it.
Dynamite?
Yeah,
What,
yeah.
so they would find their bit and then go, there may be lots more here, but I'm just going to...
Yeah, just in case there is. Or I think if they couldn't carry stuff back, or if they'd found the thing they needed to find.
They couldn't carry stuff back.
Well, that's all I can get of the.
Or maybe they thought they would propel it back with the dynamite. Or something.
I read that on one occasion their 2 teams of researchers even had a stone throwing battle against each other. They
throwing.
Yeah, they
Wow.
hated each other.
It was
Throwing
immature
fossils
stuff.
at each other. Do you
Yeah.
reckon?
No, I think just
Oh, just stones.
yeah.
And it was quite, even though they were obviously really successful, A, what are we missing that we could have? And B, it was quite damaging to their, how good they were at their work, because they constantly rushed to have stuff published before the other person. And this is whence the Brontosaurus cock-up came about. So Marsh, Othniel Marsh, named it Apatosaurus, and then he thought he'd found a different dinosaur and he named it the Brontosaurus, and that was a really catchy name because it means thunder horse or something. And it turned
Thunder
out
wizard.
that it wasn't a Brontosaurus, it was just another Apatosaurus, and but by that, and that was just because he'd sped it through, because he must publish more papers then, and he won the Bone Wars in the end because he named 80 new species and Cope only named 56.
I don't think there were that many winners
No.
in this, really, were there?
Ooh, the voice of moral authority in the corner. What are you, my teacher?
When bones fight each other, nobody wins. I read that they died.
Yes, they did. Dinosaurs. Yeah, they've gone.
I've got a great fact about.
That was your fact next week.
So after Cope Marsh, when he got into government, he devoted his as you say, he made himself hugely powerful just so he could spite the other guy. But then he tried to take Cope's fossils away from him, and that was his crucial misstep because. He said these were found with government money and dug up with government money, therefore the government owns them and we're going to take your collection away from you. But Cope proved that he paid for all of his own. And
he had the receipts. Kept the receipts, right?
He kept the receipts, yeah. And he destroyed Marsh's reputation by showing that Marsh had behaved so unethically. So then Marsh lost his job in government, lost all his income, lost everything. Cope died 56 years old, penniless. Marsh died 2 years after that, and he had $186 left.
You see, Anna, no winners.
And also,
I've learned my lesson.
The dinosaurs are all. They named 142 dinosaurs, but only 32
That is true.
are actual. They're still dinosaurs.
They got overexcited.
A lot of them were mistakes. They made 110 fake dinosaurs and rushed to beat the other guy.
They're not fake. We just weren't as good at classifying species then.
Yeah.
Cool dinosaur thing. The most complete, or one of the most complete fossils we have of a T-Rex was wrapped around and with its teeth embedded in the most complete fossil we have of a Triceratops.
Wow.
It's really cool. So annoyingly, it went straight to Bonhams, and they're trying to sell it for something like $10 million or something. So they haven't got scientists in to verify.
Was that quite
but
recently?
Yeah, it was last year, but it didn't go.
And they were saying about how T-Rexes would have eaten them. And they would have taken the head off like a tin opener kind of thing.
Is that how? Because his teeth were embedded in its neck. The teeth had come out of the T-Rex and were in this.
So that was the theory, that they would just cut around the neck and then take the head off and eat the inside.
So then it was doing this, and there was an earthquake, they think, and which caused sand to fall on top of them, and they sort of sunk into the sinking sand, and they were forever embraced for 60 million years. They've been embraced.
As if it wasn't exciting enough with dinosaurs fighting, then there was an earthquake. That's amazing.
That's incredible.
You don't get that kind of entertainment anymore.
I read the very first dinosaur bone that was ever found was, at the time, not thought to be a dinosaur bone. It was in retrospective, kind of looking at the drawings of the thing that was described, and it was a guy called Robert Plot.
Oh, yeah.
And Robert Plot, he thought what he'd found was not a dinosaur, but a giant. Which is incredible. He thought, he was looking at this bone, he was like, this must be a giant man. Wow. And so he told everyone that that's what he thought it was.
Yeah, it was actually, it was a top of the thigh bone. And because of the shape of the top of the thigh bone of a dinosaur, it's quite hard to imagine that, but because of its shape, they called it scrotum humanum. Because it looked like a giant scrotum. And the thing is that they...
Giant balls. Is that what he thought it was?
That wasn't him. That was Richard Brooks who thought that, but he came a little bit later. He thought it was a giant, like an elephant or something like that.
Right.
But then they came along, called it scrotum humanum, and then they realised it was a megalosaurus bone. But according to the rules of nomenclature, they should keep the first thing that it was called, so the megalosaurus should really be called scrotum humanum.
That's so good. Yeah. So the thing I really liked about this guy, though, Robert Plot, he was quite an influential character back in the day when it came to science and classifying things and pushing forward ideas. He also wrote about, and I'd not heard about this until today when I was looking into him, he wrote about the first ever noted double sunset.
What?
Yeah, have you heard about this? Okay, so he noticed it in Leek, which I've not heard of either. I don't know what that is.
It's famous for it. I think if you're from anywhere near Leek, they're known for their double sunsets.
For their double sunsets.
Yeah, it's amazing.
What is it then?
No, I don't.
No, it's a real thing. It's a real thing. It's just where the contours of the Earth are aligned such that when the sun sets on a certain day of the year, I think it's on the solstice, it looks like it sets over one hill, and then because of the distance a certain hill behind it is, it rises up again and sets again. Just look at it on YouTube.
It's a real phenomenon.
It's a double sun. It's not magic. It's just the angle of the sun compared to the mountains.
And it's in England. It's a double sunset. It's really exciting.
It's pretty great.
Cool. Yeah,
it's amazing.
Another thing, just on rivalries, that I really like is that there's so much academic warfare that goes on. It's not just with the dinosaur hunters. You look through any bit of history up until now. I tweeted once saying, where does outer space begin? And that sparked a huge debate on Twitter for ages where no one knew where outer space technically began. So I love collecting these little things. And I found this thing that the first mobile phone call ever placed was in April the 3rd, on April the 3rd, 1973. There was a guy called Martin Cooper. He invented it. And he basically worked for Motorola. And his very first phone call, when he was like, we've made the mobile phone, let's do this, his very first phone call was to the rivals at AT&T to say that they've got there first. How cool is that? He called them and went, we got there, suckers, bye, and hung up. That was the very first mobile phone call ever made, 1973. We need to move on, by the way.
Shall we just quickly talk
Yeah,
about
yeah.
what a bastard Edison was?
Go for it, yeah.
It's about bloody time.
I think it is. So obviously, Edison is credited with a great deal. He was a propaganda maestro, and he came up with DC current. While Tesla was coming up with AC current, which is what is used mostly around the world now because it's much more useful. It travels longer distances, etc. But Edison waged such a strong campaign against Tesla and against AC current to the extent that he wrote to the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals in the US and asked them to send him a bunch of dogs, cats, sheep, horses, and elephants to electrocute using AC current to prove that it was dangerous. And the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Society said, yes, of course, here you have some animals. feel free to electrocute them at your convenience. And
They're not really doing their job, are they?
He did that in public. Something was going on there.
Yeah,
I think
and
it was
he electrocuted Topsy the elephant.
He electrocuted Topsy, which is just the most traumatic thing. So Topsy was a circus elephant who basically she killed one guy who poked her in the face or something, and so she was supposed to be hanged, as elephants tended to be when they were executed.
Hanged?
They used to hang elephants.
What?
Best way to do it.
It's not the best way to do it.
I mean...
This is a source of a lot of contention in the QI office.
Now,
Cue the Kenny G song.
Yeah. Under normal circumstances, we would have cut that bit out. But we...
It's live. I've just admitted to hanging elephants.
Okay, time to move on to our final fact. Andy Murray.
My fact is that Mozilla Firefox translates its computer systems into hundreds of different languages, but lots of the metaphors don't translate. So things like cookies or files or mouse, things like that. So in Senegal, in the Fula language, a computer crash is known as a hookie, which means a cow falling over but not dying. Isn't that good? And they have all of these things. They're translating them using local idioms and local languages. So a timeout is a honama, which means your fish has gone away. And I don't really get this one, but aspect ratio is translated as Jean Donderal, which is a rebuke from elders when a fishing net is wrongly woven.
You don't get that?
I don't know.
Do you know what aspect ratio is?
Not really.
No.
I'm thinking about it now, I do get it. Yeah.
I think that's quite good. It's kind of like a fishing net, isn't it? When it's wrongly woven.
I'm bluffing. I still don't know what it is.
Never mind. I do like it when interesting linguistic metaphors, I guess. And I think we might have been more fun with them in the olden days. So in the 1800s, they referred to ducks or any birds with feet quite close to their bums as arse feet. And if you read natural science journals and stuff, they'll say the arsefoot duck present here, or the arsefoot present here
Wasn't the grebe formerly known as an arsefoot?
It would have been, grebe.
Which one is known as a windfucker?
That's a kestrel.
Kestrel.
Or a kite.
Yeah.
Because they stay hovering against the wind.
Yeah. So, computer words. In Hawaiian, the word for computer literally means electric brain. That's lolo'uila. Yeah. And in Iceland, the computer is known as a tulva, which means number prophetess. That's good, isn't it? That's really nice.
I like it's a female as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And their old
Standard.
their old word for a pager was I can't pronounce that frithfljóður, which means thief of the peace. Which is
wow,
that's good, though, isn't it?
That's incredible.
So speaking of women and computers, first person to write computer code was a woman, right? Who I think we've talked
She's here tonight.
Welcome to the stage, the 150-year-old. Please come up. Ada Lovelace, or Lovelace, I never know how to say it.
Byron's daughter?
Byron's daughter, Byron's only legitimate daughter, although she was never allowed to see him because, understandably, her mum hated him so much.
Yeah.
She wrote the world's first computer code in 1842, and it was because she worked with Charles Babbage, didn't she, who made the analytical engine? Was that what it was called?
Yeah. It wasn't called a computer because originally computers were people who did sums.
Yes.
You would say, I'll just go and turn on the computer. And no, you wouldn't say. Okay. That's too wrong in too many ways.
My mum always, parents have really lame jokes they do your whole life, and whenever you say to her, could you turn on the lights please, she starts flirting with the light switch.
Well, I think
28
everyone
years, it
here has
gets
shown
old.
that's not a lame joke, actually, Anna. That's pretty good.
She'll be thrilled. The first search engine was called Archie.
Was it?
Oh,
Yeah, and so it was set up by this guy called Alan Emtage. It was in the 80s, in 1983, and he was Barbadian or Bayesian, whichever we're going to call it. And so he set up this search engine. He did computer science, and it was called Archie. And because I think like comic book fans overlap quite a lot with computer geek people sometimes, and so everyone assumed it was named after Archie the comic book guy. And so eventually he did an interview where he came out and he said it's not named after Archie, it's named after Archive, and I took the V out. Archie the comics are the most insipid thing I've ever read.
He was not invited back to Comic-Con the next year, was he?
Anyway, he hasn't owned a computer since 1983.
They probably haven't let him have one. He was so rude about their nice cartoon. The word bug supposedly was coined in 1946 when a lady called Grace Hopper found a moth trapped in a relay at Harvard University, and she freed the moth and then she taped it into a book. But still, the computer then worked again, and that's where people thought we got the word bug from. But it's not true. It's been in use since at least the 1870s.
Oh, wow.
However, she is amazing. She is not only a great computer scientist, she was also a U.S. Navy Rear Admiral.
Wow.
She's badass. There are photos of this little
When
old
was
lady
this?
in an enormous rack of medals on her chest, and she's got the proper naval admiral hat. Amazing. Yeah, very cool.
In the what year?
She died in about 1980 or 1990. So in the mid sort of 40s, 50s, 60s was when she was in her admiral and computer heyday.
Right.
Yeah, look her up. Grace Hopper. Very cool.
Brilliant. I was looking at language because of the language part of the fact. I was looking at the language of Vanuatu, which is called Bislama. And this was brought to the islands by sailors, so they're a bit racy, the words. And a lot of their words have the word shit in them, or their word for shit is sit. So sit belong fire is ash. So it's the shit which is left over after a fire's burnt, which is quite good.
Sensible.
Sit water, obviously, is diarrhea. And sit belong spider is
Spider shit.
a spider web.
Oh, I fell into that one.
Yeah, that's good, isn't it? And then I spent all afternoon looking at Vanuatu. Basically,
Go on, what have you found?
I found that they have pseudo-hermaphroditic pigs on the island, and these are the pigs that they've bred to have less and less testosterone, so their penises have got smaller and smaller and smaller, and now you can't even tell they have penises. And they're pseudo-hermaphrodites, and they're so precious on the island that they're used as currency. So they use pseudo-hermaphroditic pigs as currency, which is the best sentence I've ever heard.
Do they carry it around in wallets?
No, it's just like owning it, and then you would, if you wanted to buy a
Take
house
it
and you had
into
10
the
of these, you would like
news
pass it
agents.
over. Yeah.
I think they use tusks as currency as well. So it takes 7 years for a tusk to grow in a full circle, at which point it is valuable. After the pig, it's removed from the pig, obviously, or taken. But if you get a double tusker, that's 14 years worth of accumulated money. So that's how they calculate what's worth more.
I was looking at language as well, and so fun words that exist in other languages that we don't have words for in English. That I think we should. So I think my favourites are which one? Jayus or Yayus in Indonesian is a joke so unfunny that you have to laugh at it, which is weird that yeah.
That's my next Edinburgh show title. If anyone wants to come along.
Mangata in Sweden is literally means Moon Street. So it's guessable, actually, but it's the... Do you know what it is?
No.
It's the... So when the moon's reflecting over a lake, it's the reflection of the moon that
lovely.
looks like a road.
Nice.
And then sobremesa in Spanish is the time spent in conversation after a meal, and it literally means after the, over the table. But I really like that, because that turns it into an activity that's then kind of justified in spending 6 hours doing. Right?
Yeah.
Sobremesa, postponing the washing up, basically. Sorry.
The word, this is it's a Swiss word, and it's Altus und hinterlassene Versicherung. And it's the Swiss word for a pension. And they just say AHV, but what it means is old age and survivors insurance. How cool is that?
Okay, just one more thing about Senegal, because that was
The original fact.
The original fact all the way back was about Senegal. The main language in Senegal is Wolof, and the Wolof language doesn't really have words for colours. It does have them, but they don't use them. So they don't have the word for blue and orange and red. They use the French, but they do have lots of words for shades of grey, loads and loads and loads. No, really. Like,
How many? We don't know?
I don't know. The reason they have so many shades of grey is because of their caste system, because the shade of your skin matters so much to them that the different shades between black and white are really, really important to them. And that's why they have so many shades of grey. And the good thing about it is if you're a person who does a lot of art with pencils, especially in Africa, they use all these different shades of grey when you're deciding how much you shade things in. So they are actually useful as well as
a bit racist.
Yeah.
I'm so excited that you've mentioned Wolof, because when I was reading about jazz, it's in the Wolof language that they think the word hip comes from.
What?
And it's a word in the Wolof language called hepicat, and obviously so it's like a black culture thing, jazz, and so they think hip comes from hepicat, and then a bunch of other etymologists think that that's rubbish and that's just sort of post hoc rationalization, and they say there's no actual evidence that it comes from hepicat. And so apparently among etymologists, instead of saying to cry wolf, you say to cry Wolof. And this is etymologist banter. To cry Wolof. Start using it, guys.
Okay. That's it. That's all our facts. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening to this show. We'll be back again next week with another episode. But if you want to get in contact with us, if you're listening to this right now, you can get us on our Twitter accounts. We have a main account, which is @QI Podcast on Twitter, but you can get us individually. I'm on @Schreiberland. Andy?
Andrew Hunter M.
James?
@Egg-Shaped.
Jasinski?
Can email podcast@qi.com.
We're going to be back again next week. This was our first live show. We may do it again. I don't know. Thanks, everyone in the room, for putting up with it. Thanks very much for coming. We hope you enjoyed it. And we'll be back again next week with another episode of No Such Thing as a Fish. Thank you so much. Good night.